Today we're going to be working with oil pastels and watercolor paint. We are going to be making a mixed media eye. In this project we're going to be talking about analogous color schemes. We're also going to be learning how to blend with oil pastels. And when we are in person, you will be using watercolor to do the background for your project. That is not something I want you doing at home, so I'm not even going to demonstrate that on the video. So for this project, you are going to need your sketchbook, your oil pastels, a pencil, your compass, and your kneaded eraser. Mine's already been open, but it's that tiny gray eraser inside your zipper pouch. So I'm going to move my things off of my sketchbook. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to place where I want the eye to be. I want it to be not quite the top half, just a little bit below. And so where I want my pupil to be is I want it to be about right here. So I'm just going to put a little dot so I can line up my compass. With the size of our paper, I'm going to lay this down just like we did with the mandala. I'm going to come out to, I think, if I come to the one here that is right on my compass, it says 2 inches with a big arrow towards the top. If I come 2 more dots out, that would give me a 2 1/4 circle. So then I'm just going to spin that around. If you have something similar to that, that'd be good. I drew this very lightly, so I know it's hard for you to see on the screen. But my reason for this is my eyelid of my drawing is going to overlap this, and I do not want any of my pencil to come through my pastel. And when you press hard with a pencil prior to using oil pastel, it will leave little grooves, and the pastel will be very difficult to get down inside of those grooves. So I'm going to start making basically a football shape right along the top. And notice I'm sketching. Once again, I'm drawing lightly around my eye. This is why I have that kneaded eraser out. Now right now those ends are pointy, but I'm going to come in and I'm going to round it out. Then I'm going to come in here and start drawing where that lid's going to go. Like I said, I'm drawing very lightly and I'm just sketching because I can go back in and clean up my lines. Now with the eyelid, they are actually curved, the top and the bottom where they meet. And I want the lid to go over the pupil a little bit at the bottom as well. And then I want to go back in here and I want to kind of decide how big of a pupil I want. So I'm just going to pick one of these on the inside. And that seems a little tiny to me. And I'm going to, I apologize, I thought my phone was silenced. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. For this part, that's okay. So, okay. So now I'm going to go in with that kneaded eraser and erase the lines that I don't really need now. And see, with me sketching that and drawing lightly, they disappear. So now I want to go back in on top because I have the bottom portion of my lid. And I want to give myself the top part of that eyelid. If you are to look at your eye closely, your own physical eye, you will see that there's like a little rim where your eyelashes come out. And that's actually what we're drawing right now. So I want to extend this out a little bit. I want to bring this down ever so slightly just to give it a slant. So it's just a little too, I guess I want to say straight across and perfect for me. And then I'm going to take that kneaded eraser in there and I'm going to kind of lighten all of my lines here, just so they don't show through any of the pastel. I don't want them to be gone completely, but just slightly. Okay. So now I want right above that lid where the top portion of your lid creases, I want to have just a guideline for myself here of where that lid goes. And it kind of comes down in to where like our tear duct would be in this general area. So now I'm going to start with my pastel. One of the things that you may want to have handy that I forgot to mention are two things. A paper towel to clean your pastels, because being in the box they do roll around and they do mark up on each other. The other thing you're going to possibly want is your blending stump. And I say that and I don't see mine, so I'm going to pause very quickly and go grab me one. Okay, so one of the things I mentioned to my in-person students this week was with working with oil pastels or anything else of media that is messy, you may want to protect your surface. In the art room, it's okay to not always do that because the types of tabletops that I have are easy to clean. I don't want you to damage any of your furniture at home if you're working on this from home. So if you have some old newspapers laying around, please protect your table or your work surface. Lay some newspaper down. The other thing is pastels do not come out of carpet or clothing. So please be very mindful of where you're working and that you pick your things up as you're done. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get my white pastel. I'm very fortunate this one's clean, but just to be sure, I'm going to take my paper towel and I'm just going to give it a quick wipe. We always want to work light to dark with our pastels. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to color in the white of my eye so that my paper is protected. No matter what happens, I can always scrape pastel off and try to start again. So if I put a nice layer of white down, this area of the page is protected. Go around the iris here. One of the other things you may want to do to protect your surface is where you're not working, either rip out another page from your sketchbook and lay it down, or another paper towel. I'm not going to do that because I've worked with pastels since 1999, so I am quite familiar with the process. It's one of my favorite things to use, and I just know how to use them cleanly. I trust myself not to spread my work. If I feel my hand starting to rust, then I will protect my area. But I really advise you to do that. Keeping a clean work area while working with pastels on your page is a huge benefit in the long run for you, because then you don't have to try to go back in and clean things up. Okay, from here I'm going to move on to my flesh tone. For this project, I'm actually just going to use a little bit of the peach color and the white, because that is just what comes to me. If you want to experiment with some darker tones, that's perfectly acceptable. This is your project. I expect you to do it how you see fit. I'm not going to be looking for color perfection in the flesh. So I'm going to lay down a light layer with some of that peach. And And I'm going to use a little bit of white. And I'm going to work that. As you can see, my pencil is getting picked up as I work with these lighter colors. Luckily, in these areas, that's okay, because I will be using some blues and grays and some oranges to add some shadows later on. But for you, I would erase your lines a little more than I did. I had to leave them on there so that you would be able to see where I'm working, because the camera doesn't pick up lightly colored pencil lines. So I'm going to pause, because I'm not as cool as some people would know how to fast forward, make it look really fast. And I'm going to go ahead and cover both lidded areas, the inside areas here, and the upper part of my lid. One thing I forgot to mention is when you're working with pastel, the direction of how you're coloring is very important. Now, last year, the majority of you did the oil pastel tree, and we made W's and M's to have the impression of leaves. By making those lines in those directions, it gave us that texture. For this, because I'm following the eye shape, I'm making curved lines. It's relatively quick for this process. So now that I have my base done, this is actually my white, and now it's quite dirty. I'm going to wipe that off, and I've worn it down to the paper. So just like a crayon, I can get in there and peel that paper off. I do not suggest peeling very much off at a time, because then it gets all over your hands. And depending on the brand of pastels, it can be very difficult to get off of your hands. These ones aren't too terrible, but there are some that are almost impossible. So now I'm going to decide what color I want my iris. So we're going to use our color knowledge, and we're going to work with colors that are natural eye colors, or you could have a little fun with it, I suppose. But I want to work light to dark within that same color with a little bit of accent of something else. So for my purposes, if I were to do blue, I would want all of the blues that I have and a little bit of green, and with natural eyes, there's always little flecks of maybe some brown, so we could have that tan color in there. If you wanted to do purple, you would use your blues, purples for that. If you really want to get a little wild, you can go from yellows to reds, which you learned how to blend that way with your colored pencils last year with the dragon eye. And you could even do a green eye. But for this, I'm going to stick with a blue. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start towards the inside, right along that pupil, with a light blue, my sky blue color. I'm just going to put a base in there. And then I'm going to start making some lines that go all the way out and curve. As I'm making those lines, I'm curving. And this is going to give the illusion of the iris and pupil being round. See, as I curve those lines. So this is working with our space and how things are in space. Are they rounded? Are they flat? Are they three-dimensional? So we want this to have a three-dimensional appeal, a look, even though it's not. So now that I have that done, I'm going to slowly start blending outward with my next value of blue, which if I hold it a little closer you can see. So then I'm just going to make some more curved lines. And I can pick up a different color. Maybe I want some purple flecks in this one, or some pink. Or maybe I want it to fade out to green. And I think the green sounds kind of cool. So I'm going to pick up, it's a Kelly grass green kind of color. And I'm going to work that in there. You're welcome to do whatever colors you want, but please remember that they need to be next to each other on the color wheel. If you go across in any way, we know our complements will take things and turn them brown. And now if you're using a brown eye, you're going to want to use a brown color for your eye. You're going to want to use blue for dark areas in that. You can pick up a little bit of oranges and yellows as well to add some depth. But if you're working on a blue eye, you most certainly do not want to end up with brown areas if you're wanting to try to keep it bright. So I'm going to continue working around this, and when I come back I will show you the next color that I'm going to work out to. I'm going to now move my camera a little closer because I can tell that it's hard to see the colors. Lighting's a little funky. There we go. I'm sorry, every time I move it's picking up the light above me and it just makes it look really dark. I do have the light on my Elmo, so I apologize for the darkness of the color. I wish I could have better quality, but limited with that. Recording things are quite pricey, so I'm happy to have what I do have. So now I'm going to, now that I did my medium value of blue, I went light to medium. I actually used those colors on top of each other and overlapped that light blue a little bit, and that provided me with blending, and I didn't have to use my blending stump yet. So now I'm going to work with the 4 colors here. I've got my darker blue, which, man, that is really dark. I'm very sorry. Let me see if I can get it to pick up the colors. There we go. All right, so the dark green, that's like a forest green, and then this dark blue, which is actually called Prussian blue. These are not labeled. I wish they were. They don't even have numbers on them. So now I'm going to start working with those colors as I get toward the outside of my iris. Still working with curved lines. And I can take my green just to keep it clean using the side of my pastel to go right along the edges so that I keep it round. Just gives me a nice stopping point. And I'm just going to take it right along the underside of that lid and right above this bottom lid. So then I'm just going to keep working it out. I'm getting a real nice blue-green color. Like I said, they don't have to be a realistic eye. Now up underneath this top lid where I'm working, I want to make it a little darker. So I'm going to use a lot more of that blue. And the reason being is that lid is sticking out ever so slightly if we were talking about real life. And so there's a shadow cast towards the top of our eyes. Now if you've ever looked at your own eye or someone else's eye carefully, you've seen that it's just not a solid color. There's textures, there's different shapes and things in there. You can add some of those. You can add little specks throughout where we've already worked with your colors. But don't overdo it. Okay, so now I'm going to take that green, make some curved lines. And I am working quickly, but I am very familiar with pastels. You may have to go a little slower than I am, and that's totally okay. I'm just going to keep working with this. A little bit of that blue. Kind of random curved lines. I can even go in at this area where it's a little bit lighter and pick up some more of that grassy Kelly green and work that in there. Have it extend out a little bit. Those curved lines, and where it overlaps is going to add some really awesome texture to our eye. Please do not overblend. That means whenever it starts to look kind of muddy and you can tell there's not much pastel left on the paper. You want a medium thick application, not where it's flaking off, but enough to where you can no longer see the texture of the paper. So I just switch back and forth between my colors that I see fit here. Just as I'm working, we've done a lot of color work in class over the past year and then this year. So you should be relatively familiar with what you need to be doing. And if you're not, on in-person days, say, Mrs. Wick, I don't get it. Can you help me? And I absolutely will. If you're at home and you get stuck, please send me a message and I'll conference with you. See, I got a little bit out of my line and I'm able to scratch that right off because I had that white base in the white of my eye. See, as I'm working right here, I'm using that dark green. Actually, you can't see that. I slid my sketchbook down too far. I apologize. There we go. That's a little bit better. And I'm using the dark green now to just kind of fill in some areas. And then I'll go back in with my other colors to add some texture. So a little bit more blue, of the darker blue, but not too much because down here is a little bit brighter than what we have towards the top. And I'm going to pick up some of that light blue just to add some texture and depth. We don't want it to look like there's rings of color. We want them to go over each other where it gradually fades out. But leave the texture. Do not overblend these. Sometimes we want a blended look. For this, we do not. So I'm just going to keep working around. Sometimes it's easier just to turn the sketchbook than it is to try to manipulate my hand in an odd position. I'm just going to keep working with this. I'm not going to fast forward or pause for this because I want you to see how I'm overlapping this time. And working back through the entire eye, pulling in some of those darks into the middle, but also picking up some of the lights as necessary. Pick up some of that lighter green again, especially down towards the bottom. Like I said, if you want more of a neutral eye, you can do that. I mean, if you want to go with a black and white and gray tones, we have that in our kit. That's totally up to you. It might be a little more challenging or it may be easier for you. It's up to you. I'm leaving that very open-ended. It's one of the things I like to do once you have a little bit more of a basis on how to do some of my projects. So now that I'm pretty happy with the way this looks, I'm going to go ahead and start focusing on the inside of the white part of the eye. So I need to back out just a little bit here. Okay. So we're going to focus on that end of things. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use a little bit of that sky blue color and the peach. And I'm actually going to right along the inside of this white area underneath the lid. Remember how we talked about there being a shadow? Well, we need to create that shadow. and there's that slight reflection of the skin tone. So then I'm just going to take that light blue right underneath here, real light. I'm hardly pressing. And now I am going to need my blending stump. And I'm just going to work from the white out, being very careful as I get close to the iris, because I could easily pick up those colors. See, that gives me just a tiny shadow. And I'm going to put just a little bit along the bottom, just because there is that recess of where our eye goes back in behind the lid. Actually got a little bit out of there, so I'm going to blend that into that peach color. And I'm going to do the same thing here on the other side. A little bit of peach up towards the top. Remember, just enough to get the pastel on the page. I'm not really pressing. Taking the side there, that right along the edges. Sometimes towards here there's a little bit more of a shadow where it sinks back into our head. Working outside, well, inside out, excuse me. Fading that in with the white. And this is why we started with a thicker layer of white. Then we don't have to go back in and the white pick up any of the colors we don't want, because that can easily happen. I am still working with some curved lines here because this part of the eye is also rounded. Now for this upper lid area, so I'm going to come out just a tiny bit with the camera. I'm going to leave my peach, my sky blue. I'm going to use that dark blue, and then I'm going to pick up the tan and the brown. And we're going to work on adding some of the shadows along that lash line. I'm just going to take that brown right along there, but I want to get some more peach. I'm blending that in just with the peach. I'm not even using the blending stump for this, but I want to work it out so that it's gradual. And I can tell on the camera that seems really, really dark. It's not nearly as dark in person. Now if I have a really dark area, I'm going to pick up that blue, but before I do that, because I used it with all my green, I'm going to clean it off. And I'm just going to go right underneath here. So that is a dark area, and I'm just going to take my blending stump now, work that light color, lighter, not super light, down into that. That just gives me that dimension. And once again, like I said, it's not as dark in person as what the camera's picking up. So I'm just going to work with that right along that lid lash line area, but not as dark here as it was. Now see, I'm turning my page. As I work around so that I'm not smearing down below, but I do see that on my paper I picked up some blue on my hand and I didn't catch it. So much for me thinking I could work cleaner than you all would. I spoke too soon. Had a little too much confidence today. So especially over this area, we know that our lashes get a little thicker towards the outside. I'm going to work that in there, pick up my blending stump, and I'm working with curved lines. I want to make sure I don't come out too terribly far. If I do a little bit, I can always take the peach and work it back in. I got a little bit too much out there, a little overzealous. I can blend that in. So I'm working around. Now if I don't want to use the point of the blending stump, I can take the side and it's a little smoother. And I can work it in that way. For some reason, that side's a little easier to see how I'm doing the color. I'm going to put just a slight amount of the lighter blue along that bottom. Pick up, well, I'm going to clean off my peach because it's got that dark blue on there. I'm going to blend that in. And it's just giving me, well, I picked up some green somewhere, so I'm just, for me, I've got my acrylic nail, so I can just pick that off. You can use a fingernail if you need to remove anything, or you can use the side of a pair of scissors, but please be very careful that you don't cut yourself or your paper. Just enough to graze the top there. Because some people do not like the feeling of the pastels on their hands. If that's the case for you and you have a pair of gloves, you can wear those. Okay, so inside here, I want to go a little darker. So I'm just going to pick up some of that blue. And the reason the blue works with the peach is blue and orange are opposites on the color wheel, and they make a brown. And peach is actually a color made from orange. So it works really well to give us a nice shadowy color that's not too dark, not too light, that works with the values that we're working with. Okay, so now I want to, along this top part of my lid here, I just want to make that indentation, that top part of the lid there. A little bit of that sky blue as I'm down here to that crease that comes to the inside of our eye. I want to put a little bit more, and then I'm going to pick up some of that dark blue. Same thing right where our eye creases back into our skull, like, you know, you have that part that comes up and then you have your eyebrow. So I'm even going to take my peach again, blend that in. Now, if you want to have some eyeshadow colors with this, go for it. I'm not going to stop you. It would not be along the lash line. We want those to be able to show up, and you do not want to go too dark. So if you wanted to add something funky, like maybe some purples or something, you can do that right along the top of that peach. Just use the concepts we've been working with, the nice curved lines. So now that I have that, I'm just going to take the side of my blending stump, blend this in a little bit, but you just don't want to get too dark. So right now this still looks really creepy because I don't have a pupil. So that is my next thing, and then we'll move on to the lashes. And this is the one and only time I'm going to say use a black pastel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some more depth of color in here. Just to have some dimension once I add my lashes. I don't want it to be so dark that whenever I put my black lashes on here that you can't see it. I'm going to pick up a little bit of brown just because it's going to be dark. There's going to be some shadows cast. So we need to apply for that. So this time I'm using that darker brown. So I am getting a little heavier handed here, and that's quite all right. So I'm just going to take the side of that blending stump, make sure it's the side. And I'm blending that in. So now I'm fairly comfortable with that. Looks pretty good to me. So now I'm going to pick up my black. And I'm going to be very, very careful. And I'm going to make my pupil. That's why we made that first circle there. I'm going to come just a little bit outside that line. Just a tiny bit, just so it overlaps and I don't have white of the paper coming through. Now I can use my blending stump and blend that in so it's not too terribly thick if I need it to. That way, all right. Now obviously if you're at school you can't blow it around everywhere like I just did. So now I'm going to use that flat edge here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start on the well, I'm right-handed, so I'm going to start on the left side with some of my longer lashes. And I'm going to make little curved lines that kind of V out to each other. Kind of rounded right along that bottom area. They can go off the page a little bit. The outside ones should be a lot longer than the ones on the inside. But they don't all go the same. They kind of overlap each other a little bit. Remember, this is a protection for us from debris into our eyes. It's a barrier, so I can take my blending stump here as it comes outward to give a nice smooth look. I can pick up a little bit of that blue if I really want to darken it. I know that sounds really weird, but the blue and the black gives us that nice depth that we are looking for. So I'm going to just keep working. If I need to sharpen my pastel for any reason, say I need a crisper line, just peel the back paper and use that end. Some of them can be a little bit shorter, like new growth. Notice I start from the inside and work my way out so I get that nice clean line there. I can, like I said, take my my blending stump and blend that outward. Now as I get closer to the inside, those are going to be a little bit smaller, those little baby fine hairs. I can even pick up my brown and put some little tiny ones in there as well, and same thing over here. Doesn't have to look like we're wearing mascara. So that'll also provide us some shadow and depth. Now down towards the bottom, those are just tiny and they're curved as well. So a little bit of that black, a little bit of brown. Now I can always throw in some of that blue. I apologize. I've been making this video for quite a while. I started at the beginning of the last bell. So I'm going to pause and get this done and show you what the end result looks like. So now I have a pretty good layer of lashes, and I'm just going to kind of work that out with the tip of my blending stump, how the lashes get real thin at the end. I'm not going too crazy with it, just every so often. And you can always make some thicker lashes. So this is what you need to have done by the time you return to in person. It should take you 2 or 3 days of working a half an hour a day. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to shoot me a Schoology message or request a conference during my planning period. Happy creating!